I basically did the worst thing that any health professional would do is like self-discharge. I literally just walked out the door and she chased after me. She said, "Oh, hang on, like, where are you going?" "I'm going out of the hospital down the road. I'm just going to try my luck there." And to me, I was just like, oh, wow, I'm really on this side of the equation.
Before we start this episode will contain some heavier content. So just want to take this time to say our heart goes to those who have lost their loved ones through health and medical conditions. Let's get back to the episode. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to S3E05 podcast where we aim to build better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, this one on mindset and relationships, it's about a few learnings that this person has gone throughout their career journey that's actually changed their perception on how they treat people in the health industry.
That's right. Not just treating people in the terms of curing, but treating people in the fact of respect and just compassion.
And courtesy.
And courtesy, yes. We brought on Mr. Eddie Shih. You guys will have heard him on our previous episode in relation to fatherhood. So if you guys haven't seen that, please check it out. It's got great information, experiences and journeys. So Eddie.
Thanks for having me.
Please introduce yourself, but also, I guess, what your career background is.
Okay. My name is Eddie. I'm a radiation therapist. So to put it in the most simplest form, radiotherapy is using high energy X-rays to treat cancer. So we do that throughout the whole body, your brain all the way to your spine or to your limbs. It's a very niche kind of job. And we work very closely with radiation oncologists. They're cancer doctors who specialize in prescribing radiation treatments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So together we plan, we simulate, and we deliver the treatment.
Nice. And how long have you been in that industry now?
13?
Oh, wow.
13 years,
That's quite a long time.
That's a long time. What got you into it? Did you always know that you wanted to do this before?
No, not at all. I think it's such a niche field. I got into it thinking initially I did a year of science at uni. So I knew wanted to do something in the healthcare space, but I didn't know what. At the time I thought I was going to be a pharmacist, but didn't really like the job perspective outcome of that 4 years at the time. And so I had a mate who was applying for this at QT. And then I kind of was like, oh, what is this about? And to actually do as part of your application, you had to send into the uni a 1-page document about what your interpretation of radiotherapy is.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
It's like a job interview.
Yeah. So I was like on Google, like Googling like what is radiotherapy? Because either you've gone through it yourself or you've had someone in your family that's gone through that journey. You won't know. You actually don't know.
Yeah.
And these machines, they look like a big Thermomix things, like KitchenAid Thermomix.
What?
So they're like a big like machine, and these things are millions and millions of dollars. So you're not going to see them in a normal clinic, doctor's clinic, because they're predominantly used in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I kind of was like Googling on this, and I had really no idea, but not until I applied and got into the course, I was like, oh, actually, this is pretty interesting. So traditionally, at least in Australia and in Queensland, we're trained with the radiographers back in the day. We're trained together with the radiographers and we share some courses together.
Mm.
But towards the end of our degrees, we kind of like start splitting off into our own specialties. So radiographers, they're the ones that do diagnostic imaging. So when you go and do your MRI, X-rays, et cetera, CTs, and they work closely with the radiologists, whereas we work with the radiation oncologists. So that's the main difference there. So yeah, it's a pretty niche job. And it's been a very interesting change in space in terms of technology as well. And I embraced that over time.
Nice. Yeah. Also because like we'll talk about it later, but there's like some certain situations that change your mindset. But we just wanted to get a little understanding of when you first got into this whole job and your career. What were you like? Were you just like a person that would just rock, this is my 9 to 5?
Yeah, I think I started off a little bit like that. To me, it was just a real job, right? And I work for the government. So basically a 9 to 5, you kind of do your 2 hours times weekends, but then there's not much to it. you go and do your job and you go home. And when you're young, you don't think about much.
Yeah.
And I think these sort of situations only happen, I find, in Australia, where you are specialized so early on in your career. Like we are in these professional space as early as early 20s, whereas in some place in the world, they're much more mature by the time they are actually in these spaces. Definitely, I think at that point in time when you're young, you just treat it as a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And patience, yeah, sure, like you have to have a sense of empathy and all that. But if you're in your 20s, I mean, and you don't have a family that's gone through cancer journey, you don't understand.
Mm.
You just go, oh, I'm here to do your thing, and you go home.
Mm. So walk us through a little bit of like a day in the life of Eddie at his job.
At this point in time, the technology has really advanced. At least in Australia, traditionally, MRIs didn't used to be a thing for radiotherapy, but over the last couple of years, it's become a modality, they call it, we use to better visualize what we're treating. So we have a radiographer that we've hired on, and he kind of is in charge of day to day, but we kind of work on hand in hand on learning each other's techniques. It's a bit of a job transfer across 2 different specialties for the first time, actually, because traditionally they've been separate. Yeah, so right now I'm kind of in that MRI space, day in, day out, doing my training in the MRI space. Equally, I can be quite involved in all the different other departments. So whether it's the planning space or the treatment, and it's a job that like you have to transcribe different skill sets in different areas, sometimes in multiple times of the day.
That's good though, you got variety.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of variety. Yeah, and I think I've been quite fortunate to be in a department where there is a lot of that advance in technology.
Yeah, I think it's good that space is trying to take advantage of technology. Just makes things more accurate in terms of pinpointing imagery and trying to obviously facilitate what you guys are trying to do, especially when it comes to those cancer patients, which is quite serious. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Certainly, like in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, the way we do things have become really advanced, but also in the benefits of the patient as well. We're able to, accurately see more better imaging. We're able to, they call it dose escalate, so they can do higher doses but shorter fractionations, so the patients don't have to come as often. So it's very lucky. I'm very grateful.
So just going back into how you're saying like when you're first starting and you're very young and you're just going there to just do the job and just learn and soak in things. Sam shared a story about how a personal experience of now you being a patient and you now had a different eye and seeing how you personally treat patients as well. Do you mind just sharing that story?
Yeah, so in my previous podcast, we talked about my daughter Maddie. So I gutted my hand on some glass cup when she was very, very young, and it basically sliced me right open on my palm. At that point in time, it was during COVID. Visiting hospital as a patient, you start to realize like there's that barrier of like you just don't show up to the hospital because the hospital is like closed and they allow certain people to go in, and there's restrictions. There's like my friend took me to the nearest, I'm not going to name names of the hospital, but the nearest hospital around town. It was bleeding out, and I was like, oh, this is not good. And anyway, I got triaged at the time by a nurse at the emergency. It was a public hospital, but I suppose the biggest realization was when I spent so long trying to explain to her, like, hey, look, I gutted my hand in glass. I just want to know if there's glass still inside. Yes, it's very deep. Like, she didn't really want to believe me at the time. She, like, came around the counter, and I took off the tea towel, and it was, like, blood just coming back out from the cut. Yeah, oozing out. And they were like, oh, yeah, this is really big. I'm like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. It is very deep. I've been telling you for the last 5 minutes, man. Like, what do you mean? So then she's like, oh, okay, come on through. So I went through the back door, and she sat me next to another nurse, which I think was triaging the patient for the night from ED. And it was a Saturday night. And I understand it's busy. I just remember at that point, I realized I've become a number in the system. And you're literally sitting on the other side of the fence. So she literally looked at me, and the other nurse that saw my hand, she said, oh, look, this gentleman's got his hand. Just need some stitches and get looked at ASAP. Anyway, she turns around, and right in there she goes, oh, we're really busy tonight. And I was like, I understand you're very busy tonight, and I get it, but it's not like I want to gut my hand. It was an accident.
Yeah.
Right? And those are stuff that resonates with people.
Yeah.
Is the stuff that you say.
The experience.
That's right. That's part of all their experience, as part of their traumatic experience.
Yeah.
People don't just go to hospital.
Just for the
mate,
fun
for
of
the
it,
fun of
yeah.
it, right? At that point in time, like I really felt like I was just a number. Not that I can do much about it. My life is in your hands now. You know what I mean? So she kind of was like really annoyed, and she kind of like, oh, just throw him down in a suture bay out the back. So I was sitting in the back of the emergency department, and I had like no pain meds at that point in time, nothing. Like I was just chilling in the back of this hospital myself. I was just looking at a clock, and I was like, this is going forever. This is not what I envisioned the hospital that I work for, the system that I work for is like. At that point in time, it's probably like an hour and a half in. And I think I was like, I just had enough.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah, it
for
was a long
someone that's
time.
still bleeding.
It was I held on to my hand like it was tightly bandaged with a tea towel. The nurses at that point in time, it was very quiet at this part of the hospital, and they were talking about their weekends.
Yeah.
What?
And I was like, here's me who also works in the same system. I felt really neglected. And then I just left. So I got up and I bailed, and they're like, was like, oh, hang on, you can't leave. And I was like, well, am I being seen? Like I've been standing around for an hour and a half. Like nothing's going on. Oh, sorry. We're just very busy tonight. Well,
Talking
I'm
about your
like,
weekend.
yeah, I was like, what's going on? Anyway, I sat back down, but within another, I don't know, like 15, 20 minutes, I was like, I just can't. So then I left, and I basically did the worst thing that any health professional would do is like self-discharge. I literally just walked out the door.
Yeah.
And she chased after me. She said, oh, hang on, like, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to the hospital down the road. It's private. I'm just going to try my luck there. Oh, you know how expensive private is. And I was like, you know what? Some people at that point in stage, they don't really care because they just want to get done and seen and make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
At least have the reassurance to know that they're going to be seen. So I self-discharged. My mate was sitting outside, and we went to the hospital and had to bang on the door, and it was pissing down rain that night. I remember it was like bang on the door, and it was during COVID, and they were like, what the heck is this guy doing? But yeah, I was lucky I got seen within 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Fucking fast.
Yeah, it was really quick. The ED doc realized that it was too deep to stitch and needed a plastic surgeon, like it was, which it was on a weekend. So I kind of had the option of either staying in or I go home and come back in the morning. So I chose to stay in. But like the night was just, I felt very helpless because I told my mate to go home at that stage. It was like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So, the nurse will come and go, oh, we're going to get ready for surgery in the morning. Here's a sponge. And I'm like, so one hand I've hooked up to the IV. I've got a smashed hand on the other. How do you expect me to prep for surgery here? Like, am I supposed to wash myself with what? My feet? Like,
Yeah.
it was just, and to me, I was just like, oh, wow, I'm really on this side of the equation.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm a patient, right? And not like the servers are bad or anything, but it was just this revelation of like, oh, wow, okay. So this is what it's like on this side.
Yeah.
You say these things like you're busy or like,
That's right.
please wait a moment. But you, as a patient, you start
It
to see
impacts-
how.
that's right.
Yeah.
It impacts you remember.
Yeah,
It's
It's all
experience
part of
it.
the experience.
Yeah.
And Bonner's memory was me right before prepping to go into surgery because I didn't have anybody there because Julie was with Maddie. I had this wardsman that wheeled me out to surgery, and I just lost it. I started like crying. I don't know why. I just got really emotional, and he was like, "Oh, it's okay. Like you're getting looked after by really good doctors, and you're in a very good hospital. I've worked here for I don't even know how long." He said many years, and like this is the wardsman.
Yeah.
It made such a difference in your experience, right?
yeah.
And the surgery went on, and I ended up coming out, and it was all good. But that whole experience of it all was like, it made me realize how important it was to be a good healthcare professional when you're dealing a patient, especially in my field that's dealing through cancer.
Yeah.
So mine's just a gut in hand. Some of these guys may not have months. weeks.
Yeah.
So it changed my perspective on how I should treat them.
Yeah, and just like the words to use.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And show more empathy, I suppose. Whereas when I was younger, it'd probably just be like, oh, yeah, I understand what you're going through. Well, you really don't, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because unless you've gone through and had cancer, do you really understand what they're going through?
Yeah.
You probably don't. And that's what I mean. Like in Australia, that's probably the pitfalls is that we specialize so early as young as 20s. We haven't lived through the life experience to be able to go, I understand what you're going through and I should treat you like this. You know, I'll treat you better. Or because we specialize so early, I think a lot of that gets sort of swept under the carpet. Like people just treat it as a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that experience alone made me realize that, oh, hey, actually, there's more to treating a person properly.
Yeah.
And you be really careful about what you say. That's probably where the biggest takeaway.
I actually brought back a memory. Remember how I had like a really bad allergic reaction?
You had a few actually.
Well, like this one
yeah.
occasion where
Yeah,
it
this
was like
one was
really
pretty-
bad.
Yeah, right.
And then it was the same occasion. Like I went to, I think it was a public hospital.
Yes, probably.
And we were just waiting there, and they can see my whole face was like swollen up. I've never had this situation happen before. I would have thought that they'll like ask like all these different questions, like what are you feeling? Like is something like closing up on your throat or whatever? They're just like, oh, can you go take a seat over there?
Yeah.
And we sat, I think it was like a good 3 hours. I was like, what if this person actually had a really bad allergic reaction where they were actually going to die? And I was just like, they didn't check anything at all. Like I get that you could see like from the reaction, like are they struggling to breathe, whatever, but they didn't ask anything at all and just sat there.
Yeah, see, and that's what I mean. I actually realized that not long after my own incident, I actually, because I was in an education role, I actually had a student who had gastro during placement. So I said, look, I said, you probably want to go home. Like, if you don't feel well, don't stick around. And it was during COVID too. Like, I was like,
You're gastro, right?
yeah, I was like, you don't want to stick around. Like, go home, right?
Yeah.
So he had this similar experience. So he went to ED at the same hospital that I first initial went to, and he sat there for many hours. And he said it was cramping like crazy. So he was just sitting there, and they came out and the basically was like, oh, you just have gastro bug. Here's some meds, like catch you later.
Yeah, it's not even that. Like, even if you go back up to the desk and it's like, hey, how long is it going to take? Like, I feel like people at least just be like, hey, like, I know it's taking a long time. Can you just wait there for a moment? But the people that we were talking to, especially for my reaction, they were actually quite rude. They're like, oh, let's go sit over there. I'm like, okay.
And that's what happens. And I think health professionals kind of forget, because I think a lot of the times they haven't been either beyond that side of fence themselves to realize that. Or sometimes it's just been, like they really are busy, that you just kind of, they're swamped with all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I guess from their lens as well, it's kind of like that is their job and they're inundated with a lot of things. So they're under the pump and got stressed too.
Right.
But it's like trying to find that balance between letting people know that you're busy and then the patient also trying to understand their side too.
That's right. So that's why through my whole sort of experience, I realized that, actually, there are better ways to do things and treat people very differently through my own experience.
So do you think that soul experience was like a massive eye-opener for you?
I think it was, I don't know why, but maybe it's just because it's the first time I have such a traumatic experience.
Yeah, it's quite a big deal, like a massive hand.
Hand's fucked.
Yeah. I got really lucky. So the hand surgeon was actually quite well known in Brisbane. He told me like I was millimeters away from nicking the nerves and the tendons and that. So
wow.
Yeah, I got really, really, really lucky.
How did you break that glass in your first place?
So I was doing some washing, and I think one of our friends had come over, and he had put a glass cup where it normally wouldn't sit, and I think I was just tired, babies and stuff. I knocked it with my palm,
yeah,
and it slid across the table and went like over the counter. So I caught it in midair, but as I caught it, I've come up and I've smashed it on the edge of the stone countertop. So the whole thing crushed and went, and it was like full slice my hand open.
Went straight in.
Damn.
Yeah, there was lots of blood, lots of blood.
And that would have been hard too, like obviously with like a kid and like trying to like not being able to be there and going to
That's
the
right.
hospital by yourself as
Yeah.
well.
So
yeah.
and that's the thing. So I literally said to Julia at the time, I said, look, you got two choices. You either call the ambulance or you call Ray to come back and he can take me to hospital. So it's a very traumatic experience for someone who's like hadn't really had a major surgery. And I think that in itself has changed my mindset a little bit about how I would want to treat my patients
Yeah.
for sure, like on a day-to-day basis. Because I used to just be like, take a seat here, like almost like automated.
Yeah.
I've since come a bit more sort of empathy. Yeah. You know, you want to treat people how you
Want to be treated?
how they want to be treated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a big eye opener for me.
Oh, that's a big story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even for like my industry, I'm very much like that sometimes. It's very much like, oh, you're doing your job, you see people and it's whatever. But I think sometimes you don't really put yourself in those shoes sometimes and say, okay, well, what are they truly feeling? Because it's a big moment, right? Like if they're in the emergency room or whatever it is, it's a big deal.
Yep.
So sometimes we don't relate to them in a way where we feel for them.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. I think you have to fully understand their situation, but it's just trying to imagine yourself in their shoes so you can kind of understand a little bit of how they might be feeling or what they're going through as well.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And I think particularly in our fields, you definitely get a variety of cases of patients that range from ones that are sort of, you know, have good long-term outcome and ones that don't have a good long-term outcome. So you see a variety of them. Now I really feel that, not feel bad, but like you want to make the experience in this whole journey as better as much as
Yeah.
possible. And if one way to do that is to be more kind and at least make the experience less sort of
Like a daunting,
overwhelming
yeah.
or daunting. Because a lot of the guys that come to us, like they're already heightened up.
Yeah, of
Mm.
course.
It's a life-changing situation. Just like my hand, I know my hand, luckily, didn't have to go through physio, didn't have to redo all my mobility. So it's not so much of a life-changing experience, but for a lot of these guys that come to us, it is.
Yeah. It's really important.
Obviously with your job, your role, you obviously see quite a lot of patients every day. How do you deal with the emotional toll with that? Because I assume you have to give bad news and
I don't so much have to. The rad-oncs have to, the oncologists. But I gotta be honest, I think I'm a little bit desensitized by it over the years because of just, you just see a whole variety of the situation. But I think I kind of try and stay my mind positive for them. So at the end of the day, like I'm trying to do this to benefit them. So I try to explain it from that point of view. So like now I do a lot of cannulas and stuff, or MRIs and all that sort of stuff. You know, I don't want to be putting a needle in their arm, but I'm only doing this for your benefit. And I'm trying to bring that perspective.
yeah, trying to educate them in a way.
Yeah, that's right. So I feel like that's how I kind of deal with that mental toll, is like I see it as like I'm kind of trying to do a good deed rather than I feel sorry for them. Just I see it as like my importance of my job is to, at the end of the day, I mean, they say cure cancer, to cure them. You try and do your best to
Facilitate with it.
facilitate. Yeah. So I came from that perspective in the sense that I don't try and take stuff home with me. And there, I mean, to be fair, there are situations where there are things that we just can't unsee and we take home with us. Yeah, you have to be very resilient in this job. Like I've seen as young as 16 to 18-year-olds
Wow.
with no good prognosis.
Jeez.
You know, as opposed to like I've seen hundreds-something-year-olds.
Yep.
So you have to keep your mind really open. I feel like I just try to not take stuff home with you, especially dealing with these cancer stuff. It's like you can sit with you sometimes.
Yeah. On those tougher situations where you kind of do bring it home, even though you're trying not to, what do you do to help yourself?
I think talking to Julie, it kind of helps me sort of just gets that off my mind a little bit.
True.
Like she'll go, oh, how's your day? And I'll be like, oh yeah, I have this so-and-so patient that did this and this happened. And I kind of just like,
It's like a journal.
yeah, it's like a
entry.
you just kind of
Helps you release.
helps you release that. You don't think about it very much after.
That's good.
But it is hard just the other day, we had I think it was a 20-something-year-old, and she's got metastatic cancer all through her bones, right? And we were doing her imaging, and she was like yelling in agony, and like,
Wow.
and even then, like on treatment now, but like my colleagues have picked that up. Like all of them have been affected by this because she's young,
Yeah. It is sad.
and unfortunately, that stuff you will take that home. Yeah, it is hard. I don't know. I don't really have a strategy because you don't want to be attached to. If you like become overbearing and you become like too nice and show too much empathy, then you become emotionally attached.
Yeah, that's right.
Because then if some shit goes down, then you're like, oh shit, like did I do my job right?
Yeah, and
Or,
affects
like,
you. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to keep it really professional, but equally you have to draw that fine line of like sympathize but show empathy.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was our next question is like, now that you've learned to empathize a bit more, but you still have to be professional, how do you balance between the two of showing the empathy, but then not being attached and still making the best professional decision?
Yeah, because I would assume, you meet your patients, you build some rapport, and you're like, oh, I like this guy or whoever it is.
Just treat them like a person. I feel like that's just, I mean, yeah, you're right. I build a report and all that sort of stuff with them, especially those that are on treatment, and then they can have you can be on treatment for them for 6 weeks and they might see you every day. It'll be like somebody, you become a friend, right? So you still have to, I still think at the end of the day, like that is my job. My job is to make sure they get the best treatment. I always seems to try and find that fine line somewhere.
So it's kind of like just throughout that duration that they need to see you, as long as they get that good experience, be kind to
right.
them,
Be
like,
kind.
just do what you can.
That's right. Do as much as I can and facilitate as much as I can. So like if they've got like appointments in the department, I might take them out to the front desk. I might introduce them to the nurses there, or oh hey, these guys are here to see you, and just make it more personal.
Make them feel welcome and warm, right? Yeah.
And I always explain this to my students sometimes, is that the way you show care for someone is you often see these like older guys who get lost in these big hospitals, right? All it takes is for you to just stop for a moment and go, are you okay? What floor are you trying to get to? Which department you're trying to get to? And like lead them to the right direction. If you don't know where you're going, take them out to the information desk. All that little experience,
The finer
the
details.
finer details
Yes.
makes it personable for the patient.
Yeah.
I always explain to students, like, if you have the time, stop and just ask them where they're going. Where do you need to go? Like, because it's very daunting in a
It
hospital
is,
system.
yeah.
Going there and you're like, I don't know where half the stuff is. Like, you only go there because there's something going on.
Yeah.
Like, or you have an appointment for something, or like you need to see this, or special. Like, people don't just show in a hospital. It's not a place to just go and hang out. And,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's good that you teach your students the act of care and the act of service.
I think so, and I think that's lost in a
Yeah.
lot of these societies where sort of, I mean, you can walk into a hospital and everyone's got their phone down, like they're looking at their phone while they're walking. And again, I'm guilty of it myself, but
But I mean, like, it's not even just in hospitals. You see it everywhere that you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I think it's really good that you actually do teach these guys because, man, even when I go into the hospital, it is really overwhelming.
It is, and I think if you're like an oldie,
No sense of
80-year-old,
direction and things like that.
and you're
Far
dealing with
out.
like all this sort of stuff, like you just be overwhelmed. So I see it from that perspective. Like when I'm doing the education role, I try and teach them. I do a tutorial on like empathy, and I'll ask them like, how do you show empathy to patients? What are the examples that you've seen from your placement? Like you're here to learn something,
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
I like
good.
that.
and I don't think I had any of that
When you started,
no,
yeah.
No, it was just very much so like you hand on your job, you just get tossed in these roles.
Hmm. From all of this, like your lessons and like your career journey, was there any one or a few positive outcomes that you didn't expect from this mindset shift? Maybe even just how you see yourself or carry yourself throughout the day, or
Looking back, or like
just now, do you feel like there's any unexpected positive outcomes that just from having this mindset shift, did it help you with your own life in general, or like did it help with your career?
I think it makes me a bit more mellow through that whole experience, isn't it? Like I feel like I've become sort of, you appreciate your own life. I
Yep.
think that's probably the positive thing. Like you realize that how important that your health actually really, really is.
Yeah.
Mm.
because there's a lot of people that go through this they don't know if they're gonna like have the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think I've definitely had a bit of a personality check myself, and like just being more approachable as a person as opposed to like aggressive, and I don't road rage as much. Does that count?
So that's
You know
a
what I mean?
positive
Yeah, like I
outcome.
don't like I get yelled at these days if I get remotely even a little bit angry in the car.
Same.
And maybe it's just a bit of a maturity too. Maybe we've just all grown older. I don't know. Like,
No, that's good.
Nice. Is there 3 key takeaways that has changed your perspective on life when it comes to your role and your job?
the first one, which I think we already touched on, is like the importance of health. That's your biggest asset, really.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people go through thinking that I need to do this to do that because I need like to make a lot of money, or I need to. But at the end of the day, like, what's great of having all this money if you have poor health at the end of in your 20s?
And you can't even enjoy.
And you can't enjoy. Yeah, that's right. I think in our network of friends, he was like in like 25 when he got diagnosed. He passed away.
Oh, wow.
Shit.
It's like shit like that. You're like, that hits you.
Yeah.
And I used to be worked out a lot. And then we had Maddie. Long story again. But we were in a car accident when we were pregnant with Caden. We got rear-ended. Julie ended up going to the GP, and she dragged me along with her. Sends me off for blood scope. Turned out I had high cholesterol. So to me, I was like, oh shit. Like I went from fit and healthy, and all of a sudden with like elevated. Like I'm not just like at the border. I'm like way
above it.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. So I've actually changed my diet, gone back to doing fitness stuff, just to realize that health is your biggest asset. Because like you see guys as young as 16 go through this, and you realize the importance of that for sure. And treat people like you want to be treated. At the end of the day, everyone's situation is very different, but I go into it every day. Yes, be professional, but I treat everyone like how I want to be treated. And I just try to brighten the situation for a very daunting experience.
Yeah.
Just thinking about like if you were on that seat. So in fact, the other day I had a patient tell me I was putting a cannula in her arm, and she was telling me that was the nicest cannula experience
That's good.
She's ever had.
She's ever had in the last God knows how long, because she said it was like I wasn't rough, and she didn't feel like wiggling around trying to jab her arm. It's just like a patient, right? And then, you know what I said to her? I said it's because I actually don't like needles. You know how that has an after effect? I can relate.
Yeah.
And I always say that, I'm always like, I don't like needles, right? And they're like, what? You just put a needle in my arm. Like, you just put a cannula in my arm. I was like, yeah, but I don't like needles. Like, it's ironic. And I actually don't. So actually, hilarious enough, and this is what's funny. Bit off tangent, but this is what's funny. So when I go get blood tests, I actually ask for it to be the smallest gauge needle, and I actually lay down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't like needles. So ironic enough, I'm putting cannulas in people's arms. I've had to desensitize myself from that, but I just went out and watched the nurses. And the first couple of times, like I had to step out. So that's a personal barrier that I've had to come through myself.
That's good.
For sure. Yeah. And again, that's how another example of how your own personal experience changes because you understand, right?
Yeah.
I'd put a third point. Cancer is a real reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that it's one of those taboo words. People go, oh, like you have cancer. Shit, like you feel bad for them. But I think with the technology these days, we shouldn't feel as taboo because they are like the advances in that field have come such a long way. We shouldn't feel a little bit like a taboo.
Yeah, which is really good to hear though.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's a good.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think because people always talk about, oh, like we're raising money or raising awareness for cancer, but like people never talk about how far that field have come, like the advances that we've come through, not just in radiotherapy, but in the chemo side, in immunotherapy. Like it's all that is all combined for cancer, right? And just the last 5-10 years, we've come a long way. It's a reality for a lot of people. Yes, that is correct. But they shouldn't feel like that's lost.
Like it's not like
it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
Which I think
like there's hope.
Obviously case by case and then depending on what it is and the region and what we're treating or whatever. But research is always going on. In my own family, I don't have anyone that's walked that path, touch wood, but Julie has. Her grandma had breast cancer and then she had metastatic brain cancer and like all that sort of stuff. So I saw that journey. It's her side of the family, like, but I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, it's bad. It's a bad situation. I'm not saying it's a good situation. There is hope,
Yeah.
and there is technology is always moving in this field, and I think people need to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that you emphasize on that because it's not talked about.
No, not at all. I don't. People don't realize that. Like, I mean, not to dive into too much detail, but in these days, like in radiotherapy, we can treat not accurately, isn't it word, but more like we can visualize it better. So we can
It's more
treat
precise.
it more precisely,
Yeah.
with better visualization. But we can also spare more tissues, so patient has less side effects.
Ah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that sort of stuff. Like, whereas on when I first started the job, you get like patients get heaps of side effects. Like you can go get your prostate treated and end up with like diarrhea in the second week because of a change in technology, a change in the way we do things. Patients come in, they have their treatment for say prostate, and they go back to work. So it's like a routine. Like they come in, gone, and then they go to have 10 minutes, they're gone, and they virtually have no side effects.
Wow.
Oh, that's
That's
really
actually-
good.
You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like a difference in, and just in that 10 years.
Wow. So it's crazy how 10 years is a massive.
Absolutely. And the way we do things, like what I was taught at uni is completely different to what the kids are coming out now these days.
Mm.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah.
That's just how much of a shift in direction that field has become, right? And that's just in radiotherapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good note to end
Yeah.
the episode
I just
on.
thought I'd
so-
advocate that, because I think people don't realize it. I certainly think Australia, we've come a long way, and there are a lot of associations, there are a lot of help. There are different non-for-profit organizations out there. There definitely is a lot of support, more so than ever.
No, I love that you brought that up. Love that we ended up on a high note.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Oh, I didn't want to bring down didn't want to make everyone sad or anything.
Nicely done.
Anyway.
Well, thank you, Eddie, for sharing your journey and the experiences. You shed a lot of light, especially when it comes to just the cancer side of things. And I think from a perspective of someone that sees this every single day, the mindset and what you're thinking about is huge. And for the people who obviously are potentially going through a journey where, someone in their family is going through it, you can understand, it is not a positive experience, and it's all just about understanding and trying to put yourself in their situation.
And at the end of the day, be kind to one another.
Yeah, for sure. They're human beings, man. Like you have to treat each other kindly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No matter what field, I think, like whether it's like health or like banking or
Yeah, what do they call what goes around comes around, right?
Yeah.
Like if you be nice to people, you can get good karma.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the biggest thing is life's short too.
Yeah. I think you don't realize it until you're someone like me in the field that I'm in. Wow, you really treasure the little thing.
Yeah, really loved all the stuff that you shared and even the experience with your hand, which was unfortunate, but
yeah,
it taught
that's
you such a big thing. So thank you once again.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, for the listeners out there, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.